My server room is always kept at exactly 65 degrees. It is a controlled environment, predictable, safe. But at 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday, the blue light of my phone sliced through the darkness like a system failure alert flashing across a clean dashboard. The contact name read Mother. We hadn't spoken in 730 days. 2 full years reduced to a number I had once calculated out of morbid curiosity and then archived like old log data. There was no greeting, no "how are you?" Just a demand written with the cold efficiency of a command prompt. We need the transfer by tomorrow morning. $300,000. Don't be selfish. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I simply stared at the screen, studying the audacity the same way I dissect malicious code, tracing its origin, evaluating its intent, searching for embedded threats. Before I tell you what I did next, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. To understand why I didn't delete the message on instinct, you have to understand the infrastructure of my family. We were raised in the long shadow of Silicon Valley, where perceived value outweighs actual function and optics determine status. In the operating system of our household, my sister Taylor was the user interface. She was bright, animated, visually optimized for public display. She was crafted for presentation. I was the back-end architecture. I kept processes stable. I resolved crashes before anyone noticed them. I handled complexity quietly, invisibly. For years, I tried to calculate the equation of their affection, isolating variables to understand why I was treated like corrupted data. It took me nearly a decade to debug the psychology. It wasn't that they loved Taylor more in any traditional sense. It was narcissistic projection coded into parental behavior. When they looked at Taylor, they saw the admiration and spotlight they believed the world owed them. She reflected their hunger for applause. When they looked at me, with oil-stained hands from assembling hardware and dark circles from coding until sunrise, they saw labor, they saw discipline, they saw effort. I mirrored the parts of themselves they resented. They didn't despise me for lacking value. They despised me because I exposed theirs. The system crash happened when I was 18. I had been accepted into an elite accelerated coding program at MIT. It was more than an education. It was an extraction plan. The tuition was steep, but the employment placement rate was flawless. I came to dinner armed with statistics, printed projections, scholarship percentages. My father, Daniel, barely glanced up from his phone. He dismissed it as a phase. He called coding antisocial. Then he delivered the line that would hardwire itself into my nervous system. Savannah, we don't invest in hobbies. It is bad ROI, return on investment. He spoke about my future as if it were a volatile stock to avoid. I accepted it at first as financial caution, until a week later when I walked into a living room transformed into a photo shoot set. Bright lights, stylists from Los Angeles, makeup artists adjusting dangles. My mother, Rebecca, was radiant with pride. They were building Taylor's modeling portfolio. I found the invoice carelessly placed on the counter. $50,000 for professional headshots of a 19-year-old whose primary skill was looking unattainable in couture. When I asked about the expense, my mother smiled as if explaining something obvious. This isn't spending, Savannah. This is brand building. This is an investment. That was the moment my internal firewall activated. I packed my bag without theatrics. I didn't cry. I called the only person in the family who valued substance over spectacle, Aunt Patricia. She wired the tuition the next morning and labeled it seed capital. She told me markets eventually correct themselves. She said my parents had overestimated Flash and underestimated Foundation. She was right, but I never predicted the market correction would arrive with a $300,000 invoice attached. 9 years later, I live in Los Altos Hills. My house is not sentimental. It is structural. Steel, glass, reinforced concrete overlooking the rolling fog. Every access point is secured. Biometric entry, thermal sensors, encryption layers stronger than most government agencies. I constructed my life to be intrusion-proof. Yet, on a Tuesday afternoon, the perimeter cameras captured a white Range Rover climbing my private drive, the kind leased for status optics. I watched from the security monitor wall, my father stepping out, suit slightly strained at the seams, my mother checking her reflection in the tinted window, Taylor emerging last, already filming herself, her smile curated before her feet touched the pavement. I hadn't spoken to them since I left for MIT. I should have locked the gate. I should have called authorities. But curiosity is a vulnerability even seasoned engineers underestimate. I wanted to inspect the payload. I opened the gate remotely. They entered without embracing me, without asking a single personal question. They surveyed my home the way investors inspect underperforming real estate. My mother's fingers glided across the Italian slate countertops, searching for dust. My father's gaze calculated square footage and resale value. In that moment, I located the glitch in my assumptions. I had believed they ignored me because I held no value to them. The truth was colder. They returned because 2 weeks earlier, my face appeared on the cover of a major tech publication beneath the headline, "The 30 Under 30 Who Secure the Internet." I had matured into profitability. I was no longer a sunk cost. I was harvest ready. We sat in my living room. The air felt clinically filtered. Taylor spoke first, flashing a diamond large enough to distort light. She announced her engagement to James, a venture capitalist with a multi-million-dollar portfolio. Then came the complication. James had expectations. His circle demanded spectacle. My mother seamlessly transitioned into presentation mode. The wedding wasn't just a ceremony, it was a launch event for Taylor's upcoming lifestyle brand. Napa venue, celebrity photographer, drone choreography, influencer guest list. Total budget, $600,000. They had pledged half to James's family. They were short $300,000. My father leaned forward, attempting warmth. "Savannah, we've had disagreements, but this is your sister's opportunity. James is strategic. If she secures this, we all benefit. We need you to fund our share. Think of it as retroactive family dues for the years you weren't contributing while building your little empire." Retroactive family dues. They wanted reimbursement for a childhood they had neglected while asking me to purchase my sister's social leverage. Taylor barely met my eyes. She was messaging someone, likely waiting for confirmation of funds before updating her story. I stood near the window, watching fog swallow the hills, while my focus sharpened on the three figures occupying my space. $300,000, I repeated evenly. For a party? "It's not a party," Taylor snapped, lifting her gaze at last. "It's networking. It's brand equity. You wouldn't understand. You don't have a personal brand. You have machines." My mother pivoted to emotional persuasion, her voice softening artificially. "Savannah, darling, we weren't perfect."
"But we provided for you. We fed you. We gave you stability." My father's tone hardened. "We're asking for solidarity, not charity. You're sitting on capital while your sister builds a future. Don't be greedy." Greedy. The word lingered like contaminated air. I picked up my tablet calmly. I refused the bait of guilt. I met my father's eyes with the same detached composure he once used on me. "I understand your proposal," I said. "You're requesting a $300,000 investment to enhance Taylor's social positioning. However, risk assessment indicates zero tangible return, no equity, no proprietary product, entirely speculative valuation." I shifted my gaze to my mother. "You instilled in me a principle about resource allocation. Funds should be directed only toward ventures with measurable ROI. I turned back to my father. "To quote you precisely, I don't invest in hobbies. It is bad ROI." Silence compressed the room. Taylor shot up so abruptly a decorative vase toppled. "You jealous incel," she spat. "You emotionless robot. No one would pay to marry you. You'll die alone with your servers." My father rose, finger trembling as he pointed at me. "You ungrateful little mistake. You think this fortress protects you? We made you. We can dismantle you." I did not react. I tapped a single icon on my tablet. "Security," I said evenly into the intercom. "Escort 3 individuals off the property. They are trespassing." 2 security personnel appeared within seconds. My family exited in chaos, voices echoing threats and insults until the reinforced steel door sealed shut behind them. The quiet that followed wasn't serene. It was dense, anticipatory. I didn't return to coding. I initiated incident response. In cybersecurity, when a breach attempt occurs, you trace origin and intent. $300,000 was too precise. This wasn't vanity spending alone. It resembled leverage. The first wave hit 3 hours later. Taylor uploaded a tearful TikTok, perfectly lit, narrating financial abuse and toxic siblings hoarding wealth. She avoided my name but tagged my company. My PR team began alerting me within minutes. Clients inquired cautiously. I didn't respond publicly. I classified her video as a diversionary tactic engineered to provoke an emotional misstep. Instead, I escalated investigation protocols. I ran a background check on James, the fiancé. On paper, he was perfect. Tech venture capitalist, Stanford grad, portfolio worth millions. But when I cross-referenced his public filings with my parents' financial activity, I found a discrepancy. James wasn't just rich, he was paranoid. His previous engagement had ended in a messy lawsuit over assets. He was known in the Valley for his ironclad prenups. I dug into the wedding planning forums Taylor frequented. I found a thread from a user matching her handle asking about proof of assets for a marriage contract. The timestamp was 2 months ago. I kept digging. I accessed public records, cross-referencing my parents' names with recent legal filings. Nothing. Then I checked corporate filings, and there it was, a new LLC formed 6 weeks ago, Taylor Made Ventures. The registered agent was my father, but the operating agreement, that was the anomaly. I couldn't access the private document, but the filing fee was paid from an account I recognized. It was an old joint account my parents had used for my college fund, the one they said was empty. Why form an LLC right before a wedding? Why need $300,000 cash immediately? I started mapping the network. James, Taylor, the LLC, the wedding, the money. It was a puzzle, and I was missing one piece. I needed to see the prenup. I needed to know what they had promised him. I sat back in my chair, the glow of 3 monitors illuminating my face. They weren't just greedy, they were terrified. They had promised James something they couldn't deliver, and they needed my money to buy it. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was social engineering, and I was about to find the exploit. I went hunting for the zero-day exploit, the vulnerability that had been sitting in my system undetected, waiting to be weaponized. I knew my parents weren't sophisticated enough to hack my company directly. They were social engineers, not coders. They relied on human error. And I realized with a sinking feeling that I was the error. I hadn't changed my personal cloud password since college because I never used those accounts. It was a digital storage locker for old family photos and tax returns I'd forgotten about. I logged in. My hands hovered over the keyboard as I saw the recent activity log. A folder had been accessed 3 days ago. Inside was a single PDF file titled Asset Declaration, James Prenup PDF. I opened the file. The world around me narrowed down to the pixels on my screen. It was a financial disclosure form for James' lawyers. It listed Taylor's assets, her checking account, $4,000, her car, leased, and then under business interests, there it was, a line item that made my blood run cold. 15% equity ownership in Savannah Tech Solutions, co-founder status. I scrolled down. Attached to the disclosure was a shareholder agreement. It was dated 5 years ago. It claimed that Taylor had provided the initial angel investment of $50,000 to launch my company, the exact amount they had spent on her modeling portfolio. At the bottom of the page was a signature. It was my name. It looked exactly like my signature. I sat back, the air leaving my lungs. They hadn't just lied about the wedding budget, they had stolen my company, or at least they were trying to. They had forged a legal document claiming my sister owned a piece of my life's work. They were using my success, my sleepless nights, my blood and sweat as a dowry to buy her a rich husband. Suddenly, the $300,000 made sense. It wasn't for catering or a drone show, it was a capital contribution. James's lawyers must have asked for proof of her ownership, a dividend payment, a distribution, something to show the equity was real. They needed to deposit a large sum into Taylor's account immediately to make it look like a payout from the company. They were asking me to fund my own theft. This wasn't just a family betrayal, this was corporate fraud. It was a federal crime. They were defrauding an investor, James, and falsifying corporate records. If I signed anything, if I gave them a single cent, I would be complicit. They weren't just asking for money, they were asking me to validate a lie that could destroy my entire career. I looked at the timestamp on the document. It was created 6 weeks ago. They had been planning this for months. While I was working, while I was building, they were drafting the architecture of my destruction. I felt a cold, hard clarity settle over me. There would be no more arguments, no more emotional Achilles. You don't argue with a virus, you purge it. I printed the document. Then I printed the real incorporation papers, the ones that listed me as the sole owner, solely funded by Aunt Patricia. I grabbed a red pen. I was going to need a physical meeting, not to negotiate, but to deliver the final patch. I picked up my phone and texted my mother. "I'll bring the check. Have James there. I want to toast the happy couple." They thought they had won. They thought the malware had taken root. They didn't know I was about to reformat the drive. I drove to my parents' house for the final confrontation.
It was a staging ground for their lies. Perfectly manicured lawn, fresh paint, a facade of suburban success, hiding the rot in the foundation. When I walked in, the mood was manic. My mother had champagne on ice, Taylor was vibrating with nervous energy, and there was James, the Mark, standing by the fireplace, looking relieved. "Savannah," James said, stepping forward to shake my hand. He had a firm grip, the kind you expect from a man who manages risk for a living. "I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. Taylor explained that you were just waiting for the right moment to formalize the equity transfer. It means a lot to have the family fully invested. He thought this was a business meeting. He thought I was there to sign off on the lie, to confirm that Taylor was my silent partner, justifying the $300,000 distribution they needed to pay for the wedding. "Let's just get the paperwork out of the way," Taylor said, her voice high and tight. She thrust a pen at me. On the coffee table lay the forged shareholder agreement and a new document, a ratification of ownership. All I had to do was sign, and I would be an accessory to fraud. I would be legally binding myself to a parasite for the rest of my life. Time seemed to slow down. I looked at my mother, Rebecca. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the pen in my hand, her eyes hungry. I looked at my father, Daniel, who gave me a nod that was supposed to be encouraging but looked more like a threat. For years, I had hesitated to cut them off completely. I had let their calls go to voicemail but never blocked the numbers. I had kept the door slightly ajar because society installs a very specific code in us from birth. Family is everything. Blood is thicker than water. You only get one mother. It's a guilt algorithm designed to keep you compliant. But standing there, holding the pen that would sign away my freedom, the code finally broke. I realized that family isn't a DNA match. It's an action. It is safety. It is support. It is mutual respect. What stood before me wasn't family. It was a group of strangers who shared my genetic data and used it to exploit me. Protecting them wasn't nobility. It was self-destruction. To save the system, I had to delete the corrupted files. I had to burn the bridge to stop the enemy from crossing. I capped the pen. "I think there's been a misunderstanding, James," I said. The room went dead silent. "What?" Taylor whispered. I opened my briefcase. I didn't take out a check. I took out a thick stack of stapled documents. I handed the first set to James. "This is the Certificate of Incorporation for Savannah Tech Solutions, dated 5 years ago," I said, my voice clinical. "You'll notice there is only one shareholder listed, me. You'll also see the initial capitalization records. The $50,000 didn't come from Taylor. It came from a private loan from Patricia Evans, my aunt." James took the papers, his brow furrowed as he scanned the dates. "I don't understand." "It's a forgery," I said. I pulled out the forensic analysis I'd run on the digital file. The signature on the document Taylor gave you was lifted from a birthday card I sent her 3 years ago. It's a digital copy-paste. Taylor owns 0% of my company. She never has and she never will. "Savannah, stop," my father shouted, lunging forward. "James, she's lying. She's jealous. She's trying to sabotage." "Sit down, Daniel," I said, not raising my voice. I pulled out the second document. "This is a notification I have just filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission regarding attempted corporate fraud and identity theft. And this," I handed a final envelope to my father, "is a cease and desist order from my legal team. If you or Taylor ever claim affiliation with my company again, or if you attempt to solicit funds based on my assets, I will press criminal charges." I turned back to James. He was pale. He was looking at Taylor, who was now sobbing, not with sorrow, but with the terrified realization that the game was over. She looked small. She looked like a glitch. "James," I said, "you're a smart investor. You know what due diligence looks like. You are being sold a shell company. I suggest you audit the rest of the relationship before you sign a marriage license." I didn't wait for a response. I didn't wait for the screaming to start. I walked out the door. I left the champagne on ice. I left the forgery on the table. I walked out into the cool night air, and for the first time in 27 years, I didn't feel heavy. I felt empty in the best possible way. The purge was complete. The fallout was rapid. In total, a system collapse that I watched from a safe distance. James called off the wedding 48 hours later. He didn't just walk away, he ran. He issued a public statement clarifying that he had no business ties to Taylor-Made Ventures, effectively blacklisting my father in the Valley. Taylor's social media empire crumbled when the truth about the fraud leaked, not from me but from James's legal team. Her followers turned on her. She went private, deleting her accounts, disappearing into the digital void she used to worship. My parents are facing legal fees that will likely cost them their home. They tried to call me once from a burner phone. I didn't answer. I didn't block the number either. I just let it ring until it stopped. I returned to my fortress in the hills. The silence used to feel lonely, but now it feels like victory. I called Aunt Patricia. We didn't talk about them. We talked about the future. We talked about the new scholarship fund I was launching for girls in coding, girls who were told their dreams were just hobbies. I walked into my server room. The hum of the cooling fans was the only sound. I looked at the racks of blinking lights, the data streams flowing seamlessly, logical and clean. I realized then that I hadn't lost a family. I had simply secured my network. I had identified the threat, isolated it, and removed it. My life is code. It is either 0 or 1, true or false. There is no room for gray areas, and there is no room for people who only love you when you pay for it. I am the architect of my own system now, and it is finally stable. Have you ever had to be the villain in someone else's story just to save your own? Tell me in the comments, and if you believe in choosing your own family, share this video.